Hi everyone, my name is Aisha Sarwari. I, took about a 20-hour long journey yesterday from Islamabad to Oslo via Amsterdam, and I'm very pleased to be here today. Special thanks to Shabana, to Melody, to Pune for thinking of me and for thinking of our people in South Asia, because I don't just represent Pakistanis, I represent a lot of sort of the cultural baggage that I come with, and I come with a lot of identities. I was born and brought up in East Africa, in Uganda particularly. My family lived there for 35 years. I moved to Kenya for my higher education. I then moved to Karachi. I then moved to the US. My heritage from my mom's side is Indian Muslim. My heritage from my dad's side is Pakistani, but also migrants from India. I carry with me the people of Africa, I carry with me the people of Pakistan, and I carry with me the people of the US and all the places that I've traveled to. And when I was, early in my career, I had to decide who I am, right? Because it's like you asked, who are you? And you have to choose one because nobody waits this long. And I chose Pakistan because it was something that my father was very, committed to the Pakistani identity. I lost my father when I was 10, and as a Muslim girl, I don't know if you know this, but fathers are very important figures in the lives of Muslim girls because they are their caretakers, they're their protectors. So when I lost him at around the age of 10, I looked to my mother to protect me, and give me the security that I needed, that she would not go. And what I found was that she also wasn't there, because a lot of Muslim women defer their power and their negotiation to the men in their family. And I swore to myself, not me, this is not going to be my life, because I saw in her a sense of powerlessness. And I'm sorry to say, but also a sense of weakness. And I said, not me, I'm going to be strong. I'm going to fight this. I'm never going to give my control to a man so that if someday I'm left alone, I can stand on my feet. So I chose Pakistan in 2003. I moved there after I married. And these are the 8 truths I learned about being a woman in Pakistan. Thank you. The first one is that from, Leila's talk today, we learned that there's a lot of things to say yes to, but violence keeps us away from it. In Pakistan, there's a huge honor culture, which we're all familiar with, where sort of your honor rests on your sexuality. Every year, this is not a figure to date, every year, 1,000 women are honor killed. This figure is much, much higher because these are the ones that are reported. So while we're here celebrating the women right here in that 1,000 note who were brave enough to say yes to life, to choose the men they wanted to marry, or to try and run away, let's also celebrate the people who did not make it to this figure. Because in my opinion, when I say a weak woman, I actually also, was judging them. And I think when we talk about empowerment, we need to really put power and choice where the woman's choice rests. So the women who did not, fight patriarchy, the women who did not feel it was the right time for it, the women who did not feel they could die for it, or maybe they had kids to take care of, they had a sense of survival in them. And I feel you can't judge if there are any less heroes than the ones who went. And I'm here to be their voice as well. A lot of women in the world are silent, and silence is also a form of intelligence. And I wanted to request you to recognize that when we see a woman who shrinks, when we see a woman who is mentally closed, when we see a woman who is silent, that is also her way of coping and survival. Can you? Okay. Stepping into the arena will hurt. When I started activism in Pakistan, I did this because I was so hurt by what was going on. I had to work, and working women were few and far between in Pakistan. So when I stepped in, I was married, I was pregnant, I would be 9 months pregnant, I would be walking in public spaces, and people would it was a hostile place because neither was a woman supposed to be in a public place, let alone somebody who is owning, her body or her right to be maternal. And there's this society that entirely focuses on a woman as a mother. So if you're a mother, what the hell are you doing at an office, typing on a keyboard or giving lectures, right? So this was this entire fight that I had to make. And so also when I stepped into the online world of Twitter, Randi right here that you see is another word for whore in Pakistan. And I constantly got called this. And, whereas I'm brave enough to handle this had an impact on my family, and it had an impact on thinking over and over again, should I it's not just me dragging my own self and my self-esteem into this. There are a lot of other people being dragged into this as well. 3, women are depressed. There are a lot of women in the world who have panic attacks, who learn to have functional high anxiety. So they keep functioning, but inside they're dying. Mental health is a huge crisis in the world, and whereas we celebrate ambition, we should also understand that a lot of women do this at a great cost to their mental health, both staying silent and coming out. So it would be nice if our empowerment programs could also focus on how, the cost of giving up things people noted, religion, family, connections, but they also give up their peace of mind. 4, laws are trumped by power. I don't know if you recognize this name down here at the hashtag called Mukhtar Mai. Mukhtar Mai, about 10 or so years ago, was gang raped in a village in Pakistan. She was gang raped because her younger brother dared to flirt with a woman of a higher tribe. So whereas she had no part in this, the panchayat or the jirga, which is a local tribal system made of jingoistic men who are essentially assholes, decided that she would be brought into the center of the village, stripped, raped by a gang of men, and paraded through her entire village back home. Mukhtar Mai was strong enough to go to court, and there was a lot of, this was, remember, before the Me Too era. You can imagine we're empowered women, we've seen the world, but here's a woman who does not have exposure to standing up for her rights. And she went through and fought this through. At the end, when she finally reached the highest courts, the courts let her rapists off because of lack of evidence. And so I want to just say that a lot of women from the places that we come from, and this is not just Asia or Africa or South America or other places, in a lot of places, at varying degrees, power trumps laws. I have a very close friend of mine who's fighting for the custody battle of her children. He's a very powerful man. Her name is Laleen, so if you go on Twitter and check on Justice for Laleen, the judgment is that your kids belong to you, but he keeps kidnapping them. So again, laws trump, power trumps laws. Domestic division of labor is 90-1, and I'm being very generous here. So when women decide to step out into an activist role or a power role to get financing or to get feet, the first thing they have to realize is that it's the worst of both worlds. So they do not only, the understanding is that if your home is 100% perfect, if your children are fed and clothed and taken care of, and if you attain the 100% perfection of a housewife, then you can work. Of course, the perfection myth is never going to happen. So what happens is that women are pitted both at work and at home, and they're shamed for being a working mother, and they're shamed for being, improperly and inadequately present at their jobs, because men will not wash the dishes, because they will just not pick up the trash, or whatever the Pakistani version of that is, because that's just how it is. I'm sorry. We were at 6. We've touched on this theme, your uterus will be your identity. Again, I talk about the talks here today. I particularly cried at Leila's talk because it's very reductionist, and it reduces a woman to only be held for what's here and not what's here or what's in the rest of her. Being defined by how good you are as a lover or a wife or a mother, completely negates parts of you that, it's almost like boxing, limbs of yourself in another place and trying to walk. It's a disability. And that entire societal pressure is so excruciating that women have childbirth after childbirth after childbirth without spacing, and they destroy their bodies, hopefully in the hope of a son. And what you have here is that 16,000 women every year die in childbirth. Patriarchy has no gender. I think somebody touched on this today. Somebody at the dinner table yesterday told us a story about how their grandmother oppressed their mother. Mother-in-laws sometimes are the wheels on which patriarchy runs. And I don't mean to diminish them for this, because they are also working in a system that rewards them for it, right? So how much can we blame them? I don't know. It's the system that gets them to do this. But in Pakistan, there's so many stove burnings. So if mother-in-laws are fighting for a power structure with their daughter-in-laws, they just kill them off on this thing called stove burning. Oh, she was in the kitchen, the stove burnt. But actually, they burned the girl down. And lastly, we fight back. You've seen Shabana here today, right? There's something about South Asia, and there's something about the Islam that came into South Asia, which was pluralistic. It was meshed with Hindu mythology of the Kali, God. If you go to Pakistan, Raza Rumi has talked about this. There's almost like a deification of the woman, right? There's almost like women are so powerful, and it's because of our power that then the sort of wrong version of religious oppression comes in. But the Sufi train of Islam has always been part of South Asia, has always been part of India and Pakistan, and Bangladesh as well. And so I think the women who stand up, it's not like we're coming up with some odd construct somewhere in the West. This is our identity. If you look at the Mughal history, the women were riding horses and fighting battles. If you look even before that, if you go to Fatma Marnesi and Amna Wadud, these people have argued that Islam was almost hijacked from the women and, taken up by the men. And this was not how it was meant to be. Whether you agree with that or not, but what I'm saying is that there is a train of thought that thinks that when we talk feminism, it's not alien, it's us. These are some of the women I want to celebrate here today. Right there in the corner is Asma Jahangir. She was a lawyer. She passed away this year, unfortunately. And there's a conference that's happening today in her name, a really huge conference. She was a very well-renowned Pakistani and an international UN, United Nations officer as well. She fought military dictatorship. She fought for democracy. And one of her greatest quotes ever was when the Chief Justice was being very religious in terms of the laws that he was handing out. And somebody asked her while she was passing in a corridor, Asma Jahangir, what do you think? So she said, I think that guy belongs in a mosque giving a sermon on Friday. What is he doing at the apex court? And I don't know if you know this, but the Pakistan power structures don't forgive you for saying things like this. But that woman right in the corner got away with it because she was such a powerful person who spoke truth to power, and she never, let that overpower her. So I think the stories that we've seen here today, it's like when women have refused to take no for an answer, right? And so she was one of them. We fight with our feet. This is a protest. A Christian minister was killed in Pakistan for blasphemy laws. And I was there at that protest. We fight with our words. The Punjab Bar Council, Punjab is a province in Pakistan, had a diary calendar in which they decided, instead of writing quotes about the law, they started writing quotes about women. Of course, these people are obsessed about women. I wonder why. What are they so afraid of? They talked about how women should keep their mouths shut. They talked about how you can either live with a woman or without one. They talked about, any country that does women's rights is bound to perish. So we talk with our words as well, and thankfully I was featured on the top of a newspaper here at the Daily Times. I've written a book on feminism. It's called Navigating Pakistani Feminism Fight by Fight. 2 of my other books are coming, so we fight with distribution as well. I'm often, talking about women in violence. And last but not least, I had such a bad year, almost had a nervous breakdown. I think it was my life's internal violence and the story of how I did not want to become a weak woman, and I became a weak woman because a lot of bad things happened to me along my life. And so this is a quote from Margaret Atwood. I don't know, has anyone of you heard of Margaret Atwood? Yeah? So she's the reason I'm a feminist today. I was 15, and I didn't want to be a weak woman. And in Handmaid's Tale, I read a quote that's in Latin on my body, but it means, "Don't let the bastards grind you down." So I wanted to leave you with that.
We have 10 minutes of some stage talk, Aisha. I'll just put that there. And, I feel so honored that we have the possibility to bring your voice to Norway and also actually stream it for the international audience. You're wearing the Pakistani flag.
I'm so glad you noticed that. Pakistan is with me wherever I go because of my father. And this is the flag that represents the Muslim identity, because remember, Muslims were once a minority in United India. And the white represents minorities, right? Because that's how it is. And so you cannot have one with the other. And I wish this for my country, that it doesn't forget that there's a white part in it.
Hearing you inspired me so much, but it's also made me a little sad. Actually, very much sad, of course. But, this conference, the philosophy here, it's trying to introduce how we can challenge the role, how the narrative of being a woman in the public are, not only in privileged societies like here, but all over the world. How do you think to make this networking, this empowerment together, international, having conference like this, could help?
Being here on this stage, I think, is standard enough, because all of you are influencers. At some point in your life, when you hear a story that I bring back from my part of the world, it will sensitize you to act in a certain way. So that's one. But I think this doesn't scale, right? We're only so many people. The technology you have here, streaming, it is going down in digital history. Our children and our children's children will hopefully see it, right? Mm. And I feel that digital technology and internet is giving Pakistani women and women in South Asia particularly a voice that they never had before. Have you been following what's happening in India under the Me Too movement? All the women are sort of coming forward and taking down these so-called credible men who exploited them. And so although there's a lot of criticism on Me Too as well, and we need to obviously keep that in mind, but for women who did not have a voice, they don't need to hire lawyers. This is a public court, and their testimony should matter, because as we saw from the Kavanaugh hearings, right? I mean, that heart-wrenching testimony from Dr. Ford, and the horrible things that were told to her. When women speak out, it doesn't matter which part of the world they're from, then they're not going to be trusted, because it's my power is greater than your truth. So digital technology, I think, cuts that through. It says, fine, take your power, but here's my truth. And you've seen that the world reacts to it.
I saw that hashtag I didn't know about this hashtag, Randi Hår. this is also a kind of taking, you know, the harassment, the bad words, and show that you're not afraid of them. To you know, like, okay, you will not throw off my clothes, so here is my body. What's your problem?
I'm so glad you did that, because here's what you did, Shabana, with the undressing. When you're vulnerable, what you tell the world is that, you know, I have a shield of truth. Come and get me. And, you know, very few people have anything to do then, because, you know, you own your weakness. And when I told you the story of my mom and how she was dependent, that is strength. Because you know what? She survived, and she made me survive. So there's a certain resilience in being who you are. And when you bear yourself, whether literally or otherwise, with your stories, I think what you do is you say, it's okay to not win. Yeah, it's okay to sometimes even fail. Like, I fail at motherhood sometimes, and I fail at being a good homemaker, and I fail at work. But I can't do it all, and it's okay for women to not put this entire generation's pressure that just because our mothers suffered so much, we have to have it all.
You have to represent, you know, your gender, your culture, your religion all the time.
It's too much.
It's too much. But we are not only survivors. You are doing more than that. You're an activist. You want change. You know, you use the power of pen. So there's something more. And you did do this in Pakistan.
I did this in Pakistan. In fact, Pakistan gave me my power. You know, it did. It did. There were enough women in that country to inspire me. Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, she's a 2-time Oscar winner. She did the Oscar-winning documentary Saving Face on acid burning. We didn't mention it, but acid burning is a big deal. And those acid burnt victims, you know what they do? They do fashion shows. They go out there and they say, here's my face, right? I'm not afraid of it, and you shouldn't be either. So they might not have the textbook of Simone de Beauvoir, right? But they have, like, I think, generational knowledge of fighting back. And so they're the ones who got me to say, enough with the silence. And I was silent. You know, there were times when, like we were talking the other day, women have had breakdowns. I haven't been able to come out of my room for so many days. I haven't been able to go to work. I would just I'm too overburdened by the pressure of society to keep quiet. And it's easy. It's easier, right?
What helps you being in these situations? Because what we do now in our activism now, and also with I Empower Me, is, you know, what I say, we should make an acceptance for a freedom culture in every community. Yeah. You know, when you came out in the society where they have all this, you know, pressure on women, so we need to make a new culture. But it's not a new culture, it's our culture. It
was always there.
Like, it was always there.
So there's a writer in Pakistan from the older generation. Her name was, she wrote this book called Lihaf, which was about lesbianism, by the way. And her name is Chughtai. You know, so these women in Pakistan were breaking barriers constantly. It's just that our narrative doesn't allow that to come over. But if any one of us go back in time and see, you know, were our ancestors strong? Yes, they were much stronger, and they had worse off situations. So absolutely, like, it's in our past. The power of who we are rests in our identity. And by the way, I shouldn't be taking examples only from, you know, my ancestry back there. The world is for our taking, right? Martin Luther King, you know, people like our founding father in Pakistan. You know, there should be no divide on the conversation of empowerment. Margaret Atwood, right? There should be no one stopping you from taking inspiration from any form of power structures.
That's the truth. Thank you so much for the stage talk, Aisha. Thank you. Have this. What are you wearing under the clothes?
Thank you.
Sally. Thank you so much. And I'm sure we are going to have a much more collaboration in the future as well. And thank you for giving us hope for Pakistan as well. It's so important to show the new Pakistan's face on stage.